So now all of our main elements have been mixed in our song, it's time to mix in those little miscellaneous elements and things that make a big difference when added up over the whole song. So first we are going to mix the cymbal crash, and I've soloed it. Pretty standard, that is quite a crunchy drum machine cymbal. It's a very common one, especially for more deep house type genres. And if we look at the mixing space, as you would expect, the cymbal is going to be in the upper frequencies predominantly of our mixing space, and cymbals are a great thing that we can spread out wide and give a real sense of space and size in our mix. But first things first, we are going to bring this in and get the levels about right with the rest of the mix, and we're going to do this in mono. And this is what I like to do. I like to loop the very beginning of the busiest part of the song, usually the last drop or the chorus, and then just bring up the level of the cymbal. And it's very easy to make these too loud or too quiet in the mix, so we just want to take it to the level where it's actually giving a bit more punch without muffling out any of the more important sounds in our top-down pyramid. And that is about right in terms of level, and we will just roll off any unwanted low frequencies. See, that's too high. We're only getting that very thin sibilant sound, and we want some of that mid-range body as well. So we're going to take this low cut down a bit. Now in terms of compression, you usually don't need to actually compress cymbals unless perhaps it's a live recorded one, in which case you might apply some settings a bit like this. A relatively low ratio and low threshold, because if you over compress it, it's going to have that weird pumping sound. So it would be quite gentle, and because cymbals are generally longer, you can have a longer release, so the compression kind of slides up over a longer time, and you'd want a slightly longer attack to let that initial transient cymbal crash hit. But this cymbal doesn't really need one. Let's just match it in terms of gain. So it's a very subtle difference, and this is going to be the case in most instances with cymbal crashes. Now we're not adding any saturation to the cymbal crash because it's quite a delicate sound and we don't want any distortion. We want that nice, clean, kind of high, crisp sound. And in terms of boosting frequencies, this is something that you might want to add a little bit of high end on a high shelf EQ. You can hear it's just giving it that bit of brightness. So this is without the EQ, and this and with. Now in terms of sidechain compression, I generally wouldn't apply it to a cymbal crash because you want that cymbal to be hitting at the first note of the bar, and if you've got a sidechain compressor ducking it when the kick hits, you'll end up with this kind of effect. So obviously we still want that transient hit, so I wouldn't apply a sidechain compressor to the cymbal. If your cymbal lasts for a long period of time, this is a perfect opportunity to use a noise gate. And this is not going to work so well with this cymbal because it's quite a short sample anyway. So if you've got a cymbal that lasts for perhaps a whole bar or 2 bars, you might want to tweak the gate and just get it cutting off pretty much when it's finished its usefulness, so it's not just clogging up the mix with signal that you can't even hear. Now in terms of stereo spread, you definitely want a nice wide cymbal. It's very rare that you would have a cymbal in mono, especially when you've got the reverb applied to it too. But first things first, let's put a stereo imager on there. Make sure we're listening in stereo. So this is actually a mono cymbal, so we can use the stereoize button and just spread out those higher frequencies. So this is off and this is on. And in terms of adding reverb, we definitely want to apply hall reverb to the cymbal because it makes it sound lovely and big and fills up that space without cluttering up the headroom, because it's generally only high frequencies. So this is off and this is on. And you might also want to add some delay on your cymbal, because this is a great way to get it bouncing around the mix and kind of lasting a bit longer if that's what you want. So the way I would do that is I would do it on an auxiliary channel, and you might have a delay specifically for the cymbal on this. So we just call it cymbal del, and I'm just going to get a ping pong delay, making sure that the dry wet knob is set to 100% wet. And I always check this in mono to make sure it sounds good in mono. And we can have this delay with the reverb as well, and it gives it a lovely big sound. So it's on channel F. So you can hear that spinning off into the distance. And again, you might put a gate at the end of this delay on the aux channel just to cut it off if the delay is going a bit long. Obviously you can adjust the feedback to determine how long that delay spins off into the distance. And another tip, because it can often sound quite transient, is you might actually put a bit of reverb on the delay of the cymbal just to soften it down a bit. So let's listen to that. Let's bump up the gain and then feed it in slowly with the sends knob. And I might cut out some of the low frequencies and some of the high. Now something else you might also want to do on that auxiliary channel for the cymbal is add some sidechain compression, and this can be a really great way to make some space in the mix and give it some movement, give it some pump. So I'm just going to copy a sidechain compressor from the bass channel because I know it's set up to have quite good settings. So now let's listen to that cymbal crash with the sidechain compression on that auxiliary reverb and delay. off and on. And that can give it a really nice kind of sucking, pumping motion in the mix. Obviously that's really loud to give an example. And that is how we mix cymbal crashes.